The family that wasn't mine. I used to believe my family was perfect. The kind of suburban dream people post about online, golden retriever, white picket fence, weekend barbecues that smelled like sunscreen and safety. I was raised in Maplewood, New Jersey, in a quiet neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. My parents, Mark and Elaine Rowan, were the kind of people who made stability look effortless. My dad, a civil engineer with a dry sense of humor, and my mom, a middle school art teacher with hands that always smelled like paint thinner and lavender lotion. I was their only child. Their miracle, as my mother always said. For most of my life, I didn't question anything. Why would I? Every birthday candle I blew out, every scraped knee she bandaged, every late-night drive my dad made to pick me up from practice. It all felt like love. Real love. The kind that roots you so deep, you can't imagine ever being pulled out of it. But the thing about roots? Sometimes they're tangled in places you can't see. It started as a joke. A small, harmless thing. My best friend, Alyssa, and I ordered one of those at-home DNA kits after seeing a viral TikTok trend. People were finding out wild family secrets, secret siblings, long-lost cousins, things you'd only see in movies. We laughed about it over iced coffee. What if I find out I'm like royalty? I joked. Alyssa grinned. Or adopted. The word rolled off her tongue like a tease. But it stuck to me like a burr. 2 weeks later, the results arrived. I remember sitting on my bed, sunlight slicing through the blinds, my phone screen glowing with the email notification. Your DNA results are ready. My heart didn't race, not yet. I clicked through, expecting to see percentages of European ancestry, maybe a fun genetic trait like, likely to love cilantro. Instead, I froze. The page said no direct DNA matches found for immediate family. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Maybe I uploaded something wrong. But as I scrolled, my stomach tightened. The site showed distant matches, second cousins, third cousins, but not a single close relative. Not my mom. Not my dad. The air left the room. I stared at my reflection in the darkened phone screen, my mind clawing for logic. Maybe my parents hadn't taken the test. Maybe they used aliases. Maybe anything but the impossible truth. That night, I sat through dinner in silence while my mother talked about her students' art projects, and my dad complained about highway construction. Their voices felt like static. The clinking of forks, the sound of the ceiling fan, the smell of lasagna, it all blurred. My eyes lingered on their faces, looking for something I had never questioned before. Did I even look like them? I ran to the bathroom after dinner, turned on the light, and studied my face in the mirror. My father's eyes were a soft gray blue. Mine were dark brown. My mother's hair was honey blonde. Mine was almost black. I had always thought I took after my grandfather, a detail my mother offered so quickly whenever anyone mentioned it. But now that line echoed like a rehearsed defense. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Alyssa's voice again, or adopted. The next morning, I printed the DNA report and placed it in an envelope. My hands trembled the whole time. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Answers, maybe. Or lies. I waited until my parents were home that evening. They were in the living room, laughing softly at something on TV. My dad had his arm around my mom, her head resting on his shoulder, the image of comfort. I stepped into the doorway, the envelope clutched in my hand like a weapon I didn't want to use. When I spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. Can you tell me why this DNA test says I don't belong to either of you? The TV went silent. My mother's eyes widened first, the color draining from her face. My father didn't move. He just stared, not at the papers, not at me, but at something far away, like he'd seen this moment coming for years. And in that breathless pause, in the silence heavy enough to split the air, I realized it wasn't a mistake. It was the truth they had prayed I'd never find. The lie that built my life. Silence. That's all there was. Not the ordinary kind. Not the pause before someone speaks, but a suffocating quiet that fills every inch of your chest until breathing feels like betrayal. My mother's lips trembled first. My father's jaw tightened. And in that moment, I wasn't sure who I was looking at. The people who raised me, or the strangers who had built their lives on a secret. My dad was the first to move. He reached for the envelope with careful hands, the way someone might handle a loaded gun. He glanced at the papers, but I knew he didn't need to read them. He already knew what they said. He had always known. "Where did you get this?" he asked quietly. His voice was calm, almost too calm, the kind that made my pulse quicken. "I did a DNA test," I said. "It says you're not my parents." My mother's eyes glistened, her hand clutching the armrest like she needed it to stay grounded. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a shallow breath that sounded like guilt. I waited. I needed one of them to deny it, to laugh, to tell me the test was wrong. But they didn't. Instead, my father put the papers down, folded his hands, and said the words that split my world in half. "It's true." The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. My throat went dry. "What do you mean it's true?" I whispered. He looked at my mother, as if asking permission to keep going. She nodded weakly, her face pale, her eyes drowning in tears she refused to let fall. "You're not biologically ours," he said. "But you are our daughter. You always have been." Those words, meant to comfort, felt like glass in my chest. I didn't feel like anyone's daughter anymore. I felt like a stranger inside my own story. I wanted to scream, to throw the papers in their faces and demand every missing detail. But I couldn't. My body was numb, frozen between heartbreak and disbelief. I turned to my mother. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her tears finally broke free. "Because we wanted to protect you," she said softly. "You were ours in every way that mattered. The rest, it didn't change that." But it did. It changed everything. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Outside, the night was cold and heavy, the kind that presses against your skin. The neighborhood lights blurred through my tears. I sat on the front steps, my hands shaking, the weight of every lie pressing down like years of dust I never knew existed. All the childhood memories, the family trips, the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, they flickered in my mind like home movies. And suddenly, every frame felt suspicious. Manufactured. Scripted. Who was I? The next morning, I didn't speak to them. I left early, driving aimlessly through town. The streets I had known all my life now felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I parked by the lake, the one where my parents used to take me to feed ducks when I was little. I stared at my reflection in the rippling water. The same reflection I had always known, but now it looked unfamiliar. Every feature was a question I couldn't answer. By noon, I had a new obsession. If my parents weren't my biological parents, then who was? I went back home quietly. My parents were in the kitchen, their voices low. I didn't say a word, just went straight to the attic. Dust floated through the sunlight like tiny ghosts as I opened old boxes labeled, baby stuff. Photo albums. Hospital bracelets. Birth announcements. Then I found it. A small white envelope with my name written in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a folded birth certificate. But the hospital name wasn't the one in our town. It was from a place 2 states away, a facility I had never heard of. And at the bottom, in small black letters, the word adopted was neatly printed. I felt the world tilt. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor. Everything I thought I was, every memory, every truth, was rewritten in that one word. But what struck me hardest wasn't the word adopted. It was the date. Because the adoption was finalized 2 years after the day I was supposedly born. 2 years unaccounted for. 2 years missing from the story they told me. I wasn't just adopted. I was hidden. The 2 missing years. I sat on the attic floor long after the daylight began to fade. The soft hum of the house around me turning into something eerie. My parents' laughter downstairs sounded distant, fragile, like an echo from another life. That piece of paper, that single line on the adoption certificate, had split my reality clean in two. 2 years. 2 years gone, erased, unspoken. I tried to trace the logic. If I was adopted when I was 2, then where had I been before that? Who held me when I cried? Who taught me my first words? Who was there before Elaine and Mark Rowan decided to become my parents? When I finally came down, the house felt different. Every photo on the wall seemed to watch me, mocking me with their perfect smiles. My parents sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where birthdays were celebrated and school projects were planned. But tonight, there were no candles, no warmth, just truth waiting to be told. I found the birth certificate, I said quietly. My mother's fork fell from her hand. My father closed his eyes. 2 years, I continued. You adopted me 2 years after I was born. Where was I before that? My mom looked at my dad, but he didn't look back. The silence stretched again, suffocating. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I demanded. My voice cracked. "Tell me what happened to me." She hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the locket around her neck, something I had seen her touch hundreds of times without thought. This time she opened it. Inside wasn't a picture of me. It was a photo of a baby, younger, smaller, wrapped in a hospital blanket. "That's not me," I whispered. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "That's the child we lost." The room tilted. My dad finally spoke, his voice gravel. "Your mother had a daughter before you. She was born premature. We lost her at 6 months." He swallowed hard. "We couldn't let go. When we found you, we thought it was fate. You looked so much like her. Same eyes. Same little hands." I stared at them, my mind a storm of disbelief and nausea. "So you replaced her? Is that what this is?" "No," my mother cried, tears spilling freely now. "We saved you. You were in danger." "In danger?" She nodded. "We were contacted by someone from a private clinic. They said there was a baby, a girl, abandoned, no records, no family. We didn't ask questions. We were so broken, so desperate to love again, that we took you in. We did everything by the book after that, but at first..." Her words drifted off into silence. At first. Those 2 words dug deep. At first meant illegal. At first meant secret. At first meant stolen. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break through my chest. "You took me," I said. The words sounded foreign. Heavy. "You took someone's child." My father looked up, eyes wet. "We saved you," he insisted. "We gave you a life. You had no one." "How do you know that?" I snapped. "Did you check? Did you even try?" He said nothing. Just lowered his gaze, shame crawling over his face like shadow. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I drove to Alyssa's apartment, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask questions. She just held me while I broke. The next morning, I called the adoption agency listed on the certificate. The woman on the line sounded polite but guarded. When I asked if she could tell me about my biological parents, she hesitated. "I'm sorry," she said. "That record is sealed. It was part of a private case. You'll need a court order to access it." My heart sank. "Can you at least tell me if they're alive?" There was a pause. A long one. Then softly, "Off the record? You might not want to open this. Some things are sealed for a reason." But I had already fallen too far down the hole to stop now. That night, as I scrolled through public records and obscure databases, something caught my eye. A missing child report from 24 years ago. A baby girl. Same birth date. Same state. The name on the report made my skin crawl. Lila Monroe, abducted from St. Mary's Hospital. And the photo beside it? It was me. The face behind the name. For a long time, I just stared at the screen. The baby's picture, my picture, smiled back at me with the innocence of someone who didn't know her entire existence had been rewritten. The missing child report was dated 24 years ago, filed just 2 days after my recorded birth date. Lila Monroe. That name echoed inside my head, twisting and hollow. I whispered it aloud, and it didn't feel foreign. It felt stolen. I scrolled further. The report mentioned a mother, Clara Monroe, age 21 at the time, who had given birth at St. Mary's Hospital in Baltimore. There was no father listed. The note said the baby disappeared from the hospital nursery overnight. No forced entry, no witnesses, no trace. Abducted. The word made my skin crawl. I printed the page, my hands trembling as the paper slid out of the tray. Every line felt like a piece of me being handed back by the universe, but one that didn't fit anymore. When I confronted my parents that night, the air in the living room felt colder than ever. My mom sat at the edge of the sofa, her fingers clutching the hem of her sweater. My dad stood behind her, silent, his eyes hollow. You lied to me, I said, holding up the report. You knew who I was. My mother shook her head. We didn't. You did. I cut her off. You knew where I came from. You knew there was another mother out there looking for me. And you just took me. My father's voice broke through the silence. We didn't know in the beginning, he said. When we found you, there was no record, no family. You were sick, malnourished, barely breathing. We took you in because no one else would. And then, I asked, when did you find out? He exhaled slowly. A year later, when the adoption paperwork started. Your file didn't match. The hospital names, the dates, they didn't line up. We hired someone to look into it. And you found this, I said, waving the missing persons report. He nodded, eyes wet. We did. But by then you were ours. You called us mom and dad. You were 2 years old, and you were happy. What were we supposed to do? Give you back to a woman we'd never met, whose name came up in a police file from another state? My voice cracked. Yes. My mother finally spoke, her voice fragile. We were afraid. Afraid they'd take you away. Afraid they'd think we were criminals. But we loved you, Lila. Don't call me that. I snapped. The sound of that name coming from her mouth felt wrong, contaminated. You don't get to use that name. She flinched like I'd struck her. I'm sorry, she whispered. We only wanted to love you. I turned away before she could say more. Love. They called it love. But it wasn't love, it was possession. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by fragments of my life. The DNA results, the adoption papers, the missing child report. My childhood photos stared up at me, smiling faces of a girl who didn't know she was living someone else's life. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and searched for Clara Monroe. The first few results were outdated articles about the case, old police sketches, photos of a young woman with tired eyes holding a baby blanket in front of cameras. But then an obituary. My heart dropped. Clara Monroe, 45, passed away peacefully at home. Survived by no immediate family. I stared at the date. She had died just 3 months ago. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I was too late. The woman who had carried me, searched for me, cried for me, she was gone. And she never knew I'd been alive, living just states away under another name. In another life. Tears burned down my face, raw and relentless. I had imagined confronting her, hearing her voice, piecing together the story. But now, the only thing left was silence, and the unbearable weight of what my parents had done. The next morning, I drove to Baltimore. I didn't tell anyone. The address from the obituary led me to a small, weathered house on the edge of town. The front yard was overgrown, the mailbox rusted, the windows draped in lace curtains that looked untouched. There was a small memorial by the door, a single candle, a faded photo, and a bunch of dried daisies. On the porch, I found an old woman watering plants. She looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. Can I help you? She asked. I hesitated. I'm looking for Clara Monroe. The woman's expression softened instantly, sadness etching into every line of her face. You must be here about her story, she said gently. You're too late, honey. Clara passed away not long ago. I nodded, my throat burning. I know. She looked at me for a moment longer, then froze. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes widening. Oh my God, she whispered. You look just like her baby. The world tilted. My vision blurred. What did you say? I asked quietly. She had your picture on her wall, the woman said. For 24 years she kept it there. Said she'd never stop looking. And then in that moment, it hit me like thunder. The woman who had loved me without ever seeing me grow, who never gave up even when the world moved on, was gone. But her truth wasn't. And I wasn't going to let it die with her. The name I chose for myself. The drive back from Baltimore was silent. No music, no thoughts, just the hum of the tires against the asphalt and the slow unraveling of everything I'd ever believed about myself. I wasn't the Rowan's daughter. I wasn't the miracle child my mother always called me. I wasn't even the person whose name was stitched into the varsity jacket hanging in my closet. I was someone who'd been taken, renamed and rewritten. And now, I was the only one left to decide who I really was. When I got home, the house felt smaller. My parents were waiting in the living room, the same way they had been the night the truth first came out. My mother's eyes were red. My father's hands were clasped tight, as if he was holding on to something that was already gone. "Where did you go?" he asked quietly. "To meet her," I said. "To meet my real mother." My mom flinched. My dad exhaled, shoulders sinking. "She's gone," I continued. "She died 3 months ago. She never stopped looking for me." No one spoke. The silence was unbearable. My mother covered her face, sobbing quietly, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, broken sound of a woman realizing the cost of her choices. I didn't hate them. I wanted to, God, I wanted to. But underneath the anger, there was exhaustion. They had taken something sacred, twisted it with love and guilt and fear, and turned it into a lifetime of lies. "I'm going to find out everything," I said finally. "Every file, every name, every lie. I deserve to know." My father nodded slowly. "You do." "I'm not asking for your permission," I replied. "I'm telling you." Then I walked upstairs, packed a bag and left. Baltimore became my second home over the next few weeks. I found the library where Clara used to work part-time, the park she visited every Sunday, the coffee shop where she left missing person flyers long after everyone told her to stop. Every person I met had a story about her. A kindness she showed, a conversation she started, a hope she refused to let die. "She used to sit here," the barista told me one afternoon, pointing to a small corner table by the window. "Said she'd recognize her baby's eyes anywhere." I sat in that same spot, my reflection faintly mirrored in the glass. The same eyes. That night, I visited her grave. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of stillness that feels almost sacred. Her tombstone was simple, just her name, Clara Monroe, 1979 to 2024, and the words "forever searching." I placed a single daisy beside it, the same kind I'd seen on her porch. My voice shook as I whispered, "You found me, Mom. You just didn't live to see it." The wind moved softly through the trees, and for the first time, I didn't feel alone. 2 months later, I received a letter from the state archives. The adoption records had been unsealed. Inside was the final piece of my story, a copy of the original hospital file. It confirmed everything. My birth under Clara's name, my disappearance, and an anonymous adoption through a closed, unregistered system. But there was one more line. A witness signature. Elaine Rowan. My breath caught. My mother hadn't just taken me, she'd been there. She'd been in that hospital. She hadn't stumbled into my life by chance. She'd walked into it with intent. I confronted them one last time. My father's face drained of color when I showed him the document. My mother couldn't even look at it. "You were there," I said, my voice trembling. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "They were going to send you to foster care," she whispered. "You were so tiny, so sick. They said you wouldn't make it." I couldn't watch another baby die. I just couldn't. The room spun. I wanted to scream, to hate her, to make her feel every ounce of pain she'd buried in me. But when I looked at her, the woman who had stolen me, but also the woman who had loved me, I saw something worse than guilt. I saw a mother who'd been broken by her own grief, trying to fill a hole that could never be filled. "I forgive you," I said softly, "but I can't be your daughter anymore." Her sobs filled the room as I walked out. My father didn't stop me. He just whispered, "We'll always love you no matter what name you choose." It's been a year since then. I changed my name legally, Lila Rowan Monroe. A bridge between both lives, both mothers, both truths. Sometimes I visit Clara's grave, sometimes I send postcards to the Rowans, though I never sign them. I still don't know who I am entirely, but I know what I'm not. I'm not a secret anymore. I'm not a replacement. I'm not the child they built from lies. I'm the truth they tried to bury, and I finally dug myself free.